Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Box Office Talk. This is the show where I break down what happened at the box office, see if my predictions for the top 5 are correct, then make predictions for next week's top 5s. Let's get right on into it. Last week I predicted that number 1 would be Justice League, number 2 would be Coco, number 3 would be Wonder, number 4 would be Thor Ragnarok, and number 5 would be Daddy's Home 2. And I only got 3 out of 5 of my predictions right, which is actually not that big of a surprise. I kind of knew that my guesses for number 1 and number 2 would be a little dicey, so that was slightly expected. I'm just glad that I got the majority right, I guess. But number 1 was not Justice League. It was actually Disney Pixar's latest Coco, making $49 million for the 3-day weekend. But since the movie came out on Wednesday, it adds to a domestic total of $71 million. And on the worldwide chart, it is already sitting at $153 million. Now, the budget, they're estimating it's around 175 to 225. And I could just go for straight in the middle of that, but usually Pixar budgets are a little more on the 175 million range, so I think it's safe to say that it's on that. Judging on its worldwide opening already, I think this movie's in pretty great shape actually, especially because it's not like Cars 3, which was the last Pixar film, which opened up a little bit more than this movie did, but because of the not so stellar reception, it kind of dropped off. I think because of the fantastic reception that Coco's been getting, this movie's gonna go on for a long time, making a lot more money. I don't think it's gonna have that big of a drop next weekend, not just because there's not that much coming out, but also because the movie's so good. I can't even imagine this movie having a Justice League drop, but we'll get to that in a minute. So I'm excited for this movie because I saw it, still need to review it, but I loved it. And I'll see you guys for the full review. Number 2 is the Justice League, however, making $40 million this weekend, adding to a domestic total of $171 million. Now, the worldwide chart, it is sitting at $481 million. That is, of course, over its budget of $300 million, but it still needs around $600 million and over to be considered a success, especially because of that $300 million budget being larger than any other comic book movie ever, pretty much. This movie, if you were wondering, it did have a big drop, around 56%, something like that. That's not as big a drop as a movie like Man of Steel or Suicide Squad or even BVS. It's not a small drop like Wonder Woman had, however, which is, I guess, a little disappointing for them, but at least it wasn't like a 60% drop. This is still in the 55 to 60% range, so that's not horrible for this movie. I guess it's not, a lot of people are kind of trying to say oh, this movie's failing so bad, and even though it isn't as huge as a lot of people were expecting because it is the Justice League, it's still making it's on the way to make a moderate success, you know what I mean, at the box office. So it's not that this movie is failing, it's just that it is not really meeting the expectations that were originally given for a Justice League movie. But moving on to number 3, a movie that is exceeding any expectation, at least for me, Wonder, making $22 million this weekend, adding to a domestic total of $69 million. It's already tripled its budget, on its way to quadruple it. Now, last weekend, I believe it opened at around $27 million, so to see it drop only down to a $22 million weekend, that is actually not bad at all. This movie's doing very well, and I was a little curious about that. How is this movie doing better than I originally expected? It just looked like some Lifetime movie, and then I found out it was based off a book, and all of a sudden it just kind of made sense for me. So that explains why this movie's doing so well. I didn't know that prior. Maybe I could have adjusted my predictions last weekend if I had known that. Moving on to number 4, which is Thor Ragnarok, making $16 million, adding to a domestic total of $277 million. And on the worldwide chart, it is sitting at 790, only $10 million away from getting to $800 million worldwide. I'm not sure if it'll be able to get to $1 billion. Maybe it'll be in the 900 million range for worldwide, or maybe 850, and then it'll kind of drop off. But still, that doesn't undercut the success that Thor Ragnarok is having. Seriously, Justice League wishes that it had the success that a Thor movie is having right now. Number 5 is Daddy's Home 2, making $13.2 million this weekend, adding to a domestic total of $72 million, and that is $3 million over its budget of $69 million. However, it still needs to get to around 138, the doubling point, in order to be considered a success, you know what I mean? Especially because the first Daddy's Home, that movie ended ended its domestic run at around $150 million, so it still needs to get a little bit close to that at least. On the worldwide chart, however, there is some money there. It adds up to an $87 million in total, so it's making a little bit over its budget now. Is it enough to get to $138 million? I'm not so sure yet, but moving on to number 6, which is Murder on the Orient Express, making $13 million this weekend, adding to a domestic total of $74 million, and on the worldwide chart, it is sitting at $196 million. Who would have thought that the movie that lost a spot to Daddy's Home 2 would actually be the better film financially right now? It's got $2 million more than it domestically, and on the worldwide chart, like about 100 more above Daddy's Home 2. Murder on the Orient Express, despite the mixed reception it's been getting, has been actually cranking in a lot of money, that's pretty good for the movie. Number 7, unfortunately, is Sony Pictures' latest flop, The Star. I wish this movie was doing better. It actually didn't have a big of a drop. It only made like $10 million last weekend, and it made $6 million this weekend, so not a huge drop for it, adding to a domestic total of $22 million, and that is $2 million over its budget of $20 million. However, if we're going by doubling point standards, it needs to get to about $40 million to be considered a success. That being said, though, I don't really remember seeing a lot of advertisement on like TVs or like anything like that, so maybe they're saving on a lot of the promotional stuff. I'm not so sure, but maybe this movie could turn out to be like a surprise success. I'm not sure how, since it's about to jump off the top 10, but whatever. Number 8 is A Bad Mom's Christmas, making $5 million, adding to a domestic total of $59 million, and on the worldwide chart, it is sitting at $92 million. It only needs $8 million more to get to $100 million worldwide, and I think then you can really consider this movie like about the same level as the first Bad Moms, because even though they did surpass its $28 million budget, making like a lot more over it. I think if you get to 100 million worldwide, if you crack that, then that might warrant another Bad Moms, or it might just justify why you even made this movie, because the first Bad Moms did very well domestically, over 100 domestically, and even more so worldwide. So I think if you at least get to 100 million worldwide, that might justify the studio's reason for making this movie. Even though it's just a simple cash grab with, like, nothing else to it. Number 9 and number 10 are kind of the indie films that are getting some attention, number 9 being Romanjave Israel Esquire, making $4.5 million, adding to a domestic total of $6 million, and then you look at the budget of being $22 million, and you start to get a little bit worried, but it's just another one of those movies, you know? It's an independent movie, it's a smaller movie that just has a bigger budget, and it's not in a whole lot of theaters yet. Hopefully it'll expand. Maybe it'll expand next week, but we'll get to that in a second. Number 10 is also 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, making $4.4 million, adding to a domestic total of $7 million. And this movie has a slight advantage over Romanjave just because its budget is $15 million, so it has a slight better chance of it happening, but this also just looks like another one of those movies that won't get into enough theaters right now. Now, usually, this is where I would predict next week's top 5, but from what I've been seeing on Box Office Mojo and from the IMDb release stuff, the only movies that are coming out next weekend are like limited releases, and I don't think those limited releases will really affect the top 5 so much. So I'm gonna back off of making predictions for this weekend. I really wish I could, but it just doesn't really look like there's much to really predict. If you think that Romanjave or 3 Billboards will all of a sudden rise up and actually make it into the top 5, you can make a prediction. I'm just not going to this weekend, but if you got your predictions right for this weekend, you're going to get a shout out right now. As always, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe. I'm Jackson Fulcher. See you guys next time.